On September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda terrorists managed to fly 2 commercial airliners into the Twin Towers of New York City, killing almost 3,000 people in the process. On that day, America swore never to forget this tragedy, and it falls on all of us to make sure that something like it never happens again. And yet, every single year, we fail in our duties. The Crunchyroll Anime Awards is an annual anime award show where the community comes together to vote on what the best anime were from the previous year. There are a ton of categories to vote on: Anime of the Year, Best Main Character, Best Background Art, and more. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the winner of one of those awards, the Best Supporting Character of 2024, Fern from Soso no Frieren. Now, obviously, this isn't the biggest mistake the award show made this year. There are even worse picks that I could cover instead. The reason I want to talk about Fern winning Best Supporting Character is because, unlike most categories this year, this pick received almost no backlash whatsoever. Fern is a very popular character in the anime community, and watching Soso no Frieren, it's not hard to see why. To the average sheltered otaku, Fern is eminently relatable. She, much like them, struggles to relate to and connect with other people. She prefers to be in the passenger seat to the driver's seat, following her mentor and rarely making her own choices. Fern isn't just relatable though. Many viewers actually see her as being inspirational. For instance, despite her social awkwardness, she's still very confident and rarely second guesses herself. Moreover, she's powerful, capable, and has a strong sense of responsibility and justice. In a way, Fern is the ideal follower of the philosophy of Stoicism. She lives a simple, virtuous life and is smart enough not to worry about things outside of her control. She lives a frugal lifestyle and rarely ever asks for more than she has. The audience not only sees themselves in Fern, they see the kind of person that they aspire to be. Many people who feel this way are very likely to watch this video. For those people, I just want to add a disclaimer. It may feel as though, when I criticize Fern, I'm also criticizing you as well. If this video feels at any point like it's a personal attack on you, please try to remember, you deserve it. Without further ado, let's get into it. The main problem with Fern isn't the way that she is, it's the way that she's underutilized by the show she appears in. It's my belief that the premise behind Fern's character is extremely rich in narrative hooks, any one of which could be fleshed out into an interesting episode in their own right. Let's examine a few of these. First, although fantasy media has conditioned us not to see her this way, Fern is essentially a child soldier. After being orphaned at a young age, she was adopted by a priest and then passed off to our main character, an elf named Frieren, to be raised as a battle mage. Fern risks her life on a regular basis and has had several brushes with death before even making it to adulthood. Importantly, this lifestyle is something that was thrust upon her, not something that she asked for. Another hook from Fern's backstory is the type of people who raised her. Fern lived in relative solitude, not attending school and having no peers to socialize with. For company, she only had her adoptive father, a solitary priest by the name of Hyder, and her magic tutor, the emotionally detached elf, Frieren. After Hyder passes away, Fern spends the latter half of her teenage years wandering the countryside with only Frieren for company. Frieren is the only female role model that Fern has had in her life, and essentially serves as her adoptive mother. Importantly, Frieren is incapable of properly filling this role. Her whole character revolves around how she fails to relate to humans, something that should inevitably lead to conflict as Frieren fails to understand Fern's emotional needs. Because the central thrust of this series is Frieren's goal of understanding humanity and the value of relationships with other people, this is a particularly obvious hook to build an episode around. We could come to understand Fern better and progress Frieren's character arc at the same time. The last hook I'd like the show to explore concerning Fern is subtler than the others, but no less interesting: her lack of enthusiasm for anything in her life. You see, the premise of Soso no Frieren revolves around Fern following her master, Frieren, on a journey to the other end of the world on a 10-year quest, with the goal of reaching a place where they'll be able to talk with the dead. Importantly for our purposes, Fern doesn't seem to take any interest in this goal at all. So, if she's not interested in the destination but chooses to embark on the quest anyway, it stands to reason that she must at least be getting something out of the journey, right? Well, that doesn't actually seem to be the case. At no point in the story does Fern ever suggest taking any detours. In fact, it's often her who has to pull Frieren away from various distractions so that they can focus on making progress. Furthermore, throughout the entire show, Fern never really seems particularly enthusiastic about anything. I describe her as content, sure, but never happy. At some point, the show must answer the question, what does Fern want to do? Of all the plot hooks I've suggested we pull from Fern's character, this one's the simplest. Having her drive the action for any episode would satisfy it. Unfortunately, however, this show has no interest in exploring any of the ideas I just covered. Instead, this is how her character is utilized. We get jokes about how Fern is the one who has to take care of Frieren without any exploration about how this would affect Fern. We get countless scenes of Fern calling men perverts even when they've done nothing wrong, with the show never exploring why Fern has such an outlook about men. We get a bunch of aura farming scenes of Fern styling on powerful opponents without showing any emotion. And lastly, we get jokes about how big her boobs are. Okay, if we're being more generous, Fern's primary contribution to the party is being the responsible one. When the party's warrior, Stark, jokes about abandoning people in danger, she's the one to point out that they shouldn't do that. When the party is offered a quest, Fern is the one to call attention to the fact that they need the money. While being the responsible one is an angle that could lead to interesting conflict and character growth, it never actually does, simply because nobody ever disagrees with or argues with her. The simple fact of the matter is that Fern isn't a character that the show is really interested in developing. The hooks in Fern's backstory that I mentioned were likely not put there on purpose by the author. Rather, it feels like all of them were mere side effects of the author trying to avoid having any hooks or baggage associated with Fern. It's extremely convenient for the narrative that Fern has no friends, no living family, and no particular goals in life, as this allows the story to instead focus on the side characters that our party meets along their journey. This isn't a character-driven show, but rather a story-driven one. That's not a bad thing, however. Plenty of great shows have been built around a similar structure. For instance, in one of my favorite anime of all time, Star Trek The Next Generation, we follow an ensemble cast of characters as they adventure across space on various missions. The majority of episodes in this show revolve around an episodic conflict, such as a diplomatic dispute or a weird space anomaly. The core appeal of the show lies in the fact that each episode features a new and interesting philosophical dilemma for the audience to think about. This is true across all 7 seasons of the show. However, despite the premise of each season being the same, the first season is widely considered to be the worst by a long shot. The reason for this is simple: the characters are underutilized. In Season 1 of The Next Generation, the choices characters make and the things that they say can be explained almost entirely as them simply doing their jobs. However, this changes in the later seasons of the show. While the problems the crew faces in Season 1 are mostly resolved by following standard Starfleet protocol, the later seasons are full of moments where the crew must rely on their own judgment to make decisions. As insignificant as this change seems at first, it ends up having a huge impact on the quality of the show's storytelling. In the first season, the characters exist for the sake of letting us explore the unique philosophical dilemma of each episode. This remains true in the later seasons, except that it's now also the case that the philosophical dilemmas exist for the purpose of letting us explore the characters as well. In these later episodes, we get far more scenes of characters asking each other for advice and debating what to do. The actions our main characters take and the things that they say are now colored by their unique experiences and perspectives, rather than just the uniforms that they're wearing. In the Season 4 episode The Wounded, for instance, the story is about a rogue Starfleet captain who refuses to honor a peace treaty and is seeking revenge for the losses he suffered in war. However, the scene everyone remembers from this episode doesn't feature this character at all. Instead, it's a quieter moment where Lieutenant O'Brien shares his thoughts as a veteran of that same war, explaining how he can sympathize with the rogue captain.
I was with a group of women and children when 2 Cardassian soldiers burst in. One of the women threw me a phaser, and I fired. The man just incinerated there before my eyes. I'd never killed anything before. When I was a kid, I'd worry about swatting a mosquito. It's not you I hate, Cardassian. I hate what I became because of you.
This is in stark contrast to the Season 1 episode with a similar premise, The Battle. Again, we have a rogue captain refusing to honor a peace treaty, with the only difference being that this captain's an enemy of the Federation rather than a member of it. Just like in the previous episode, this story has themes about the futility of revenge, the danger of holding grudges, and the tragedy of war. However, this time around, these ideas are explored pretty much exclusively through the actions and dialogue of the one-off antagonist. In contrast to O'Brien in the Season 4 episode, the crew of the Enterprise here just do their jobs without complaint and have no decisions to make or interesting commentary to offer. My main point here is that Soso no Frieren is far more similar to Season 1 of The Next Generation than it is to Season 4. Whenever an episode introduces an interesting conflict that raises philosophical concerns, our characters, and especially Fern, never have anything to say about it. Take, for instance, episode 15. In this episode, the party is low on money, so they accept a sketchy quest where one of their party members, Stark, is made to impersonate the recently deceased son of a noble named Orden. There's something uncomfortable about this premise. While Orden's stated purpose for concealing his son's death is to avoid causing panic, he clearly shows signs of wanting Stark to truly replace his son. Fern actually gets a lot of screen time in this episode, so one would imagine that she'd have something to add. However, if you sum up everything Fern says in this episode, all it amounts to is this. Man, this quest is a hassle, but we still gotta do it. This feels like a missed opportunity. Imagine an alternate version of the episode where Stark comes to Fern with concerns about the way Orden is treating him. He says something along the lines of, "Orden doesn't just want me to impersonate his son, he seems to want me to replace his son. I'm scared of how it'll affect him when we leave at the conclusion of this quest." I'd be interested to hear how Fern would answer such a question. A scene like this would grant us new insight into the way she views the world and could also serve as a means of developing Fern and Stark's connection with each other. However, we never get any conversations like this, ever in the whole show. Fern never shares her own opinions concerning the situations that the party finds themselves in, beyond surface-level complaints about the hassle or basic reassurances that they should do the right thing. Another missed opportunity for Fern to share her thoughts is the mage exam arc. This arc kicks off when the party encounters a roadblock that only allows people with a certified first-class mage to pass. To get through this, Fern and Frieren both undergo a lengthy series of trials to earn a first-class certification from the Mage Association. It doesn't take long before the immoral, criminal nature of the Mage Association becomes clear. They knowingly harbor serial killers in their midst, and their exams not only permit but encourage the participants to kill each other. Here, the supposed righteousness and heroic nature of our party is being challenged. Are they willing to overlook these problems in order to continue their journey, or will they take a stand and fight for what's right? As it turns out, neither Fern nor Frieren seem willing to rise to the occasion and oppose the deeply unethical actions of the Mage Association. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that neither of them even seem aware that anything wrong is taking place at all. So of course, Fern has nothing to say about the Mage Association. More generally, she has nothing to say about anything at all. Throughout Soso no Frieren, she's always there alongside Stark and Frieren, but only in the literal sense. She has no agency in the narrative and no commentary of her own to offer. Thematically, almost nothing would be lost by removing Fern from the show entirely. One of the things I find most frustrating about discussing Frieren online is that the people who did like the show seem to have such a poor understanding as to why. They describe the show as slow, meticulous, character-driven, and dialogue-heavy. None of these things are true. Far from being slow, the show often blows through multiple plots in a single episode. For instance, that entire storyline with Stark replacing Orden's son was only 11 minutes long, with the rest of the episode being focused on hunting a monster that put a curse on a village. The show isn't particularly meticulous or detail-oriented either. Extraneous details such as how our party finds food and shelter, how they budget their money, and what they talk about during the downtime between quests are almost always skipped over. There are multiple moments where the show cuts to a montage and we see something that I would have preferred to see in a fully fleshed out scene, such as the many moments where Stark is seen playing with children. We're told he's good with kids, but we never get to properly see it. Most importantly of all, I'd like to stress that this show isn't character-driven. Nearly every problem our party faces is dealt with in a straightforward way that reveals nothing new about our main characters, and they hardly ever have anything interesting to say. The story isn't driven by the actions or desires of our characters, but rather by the situations that they stumble upon. Despite everything I just said, I still like the show quite a bit. The atmosphere is positively cozy, owing to the stellar background art, music, and directing. The situations our characters encounter are varied enough to hold my attention, and I walk away from most episodes with at least one interesting idea to think about. That's what I get out of watching an episode of Soso no Frieren. Good vibes and an idea to mull over for a bit. I can't relate at all to people who gush about the supposedly rich world building or deep character writing, because from where I'm standing, it looks like those elements aren't present in the show at all. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and drop a comment. With your support, this channel may one day grow big enough that I'm able to talk about good anime instead of just popular ones.